This is The Healthy Healer, where true voice is your medicine. This is where we help doctors and other healers navigate through the challenging times by learning from the best minds in the healing industry. Laugh, cry, and be surprised. It's entertainment, education, and inspiration so you can continue to be the unique and amazing healer you were destined to be. Welcome to humanity. Welcome to The Healthy Healer with Dr. Fred.
Okay, it's Dr. Fred, and today I have the unique pleasure to introduce you to somebody who's got some job titles that not everybody has. So it's a unique set of job titles, including, I know one of them is a Cantor, and another one is a Chaplain, and another one is a Songwriter, and I think there's a story writer as well, and he's got many different titles, and it's just an opportunity to meet somebody who is clearly gifted with his creativity and gifted as a healer and caregiver. So we're about to have a wonderful conversation with my guest, who I'm just meeting today for the first time, but have read a bit about him on his website and his submitted bio. And I can't wait to introduce you to my new exciting guest for today's show, Benjamin Kintisch, who likes to be called Ben, and that's who I'll call him for the rest of the show. Ben, thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks, Dr. Fred. It's a pleasure, and I'm happy to be staying up past my bedtime to get to talk to you live. It's later out here on the East Coast.
Yes,
I don't know if you Californians know about that.
Yeah, we're already taping a little bit late in the West Coast, and I push my East Coast people to go a little bit later than average. And you actually have the early time tonight. There's somebody who's got a time in an hour and a half as well. So
crazy.
You're lucky.
You're worth staying up late for, Dr. Fred. I'm glad to be here.
Not so late over here, and I have a daytime job that I have to attend to, so that's how it goes into the evenings on Thursday. Ben, I'm going to ask you a question, and maybe you've heard it if you've listened to any of my podcasts. And it's a question I like to ask my guests. It's only 9 letters altogether. The whole question is 9 letters. And it's grammatically correct, and it carries some weight. And sometimes it knocks people back on their heels because it's such a beautiful question. And it's so simple in its construction. Without further ado, here it comes. Benjamin Kintisch, who are you?
I'm a musician. I'm a singer. I'm a father, a husband, a dog owner and lover. I'm a sad clown. I'm a work in progress for sure. I'm always learning. So I think I'm still discovering the answer to that one.
I love the answer, and a couple of these, it is a great combination of things that you describe yourself as. I love them all. And this idea of being a musician and a singer, they obviously go together. And then a lot of people really want to pay attention to the fact that they are a father, as I am as well. And that often naturally makes it to the top of the list. And then a husband is also very important. You have your cohabitating, beautiful wife who it helps you own your dog. And then you get to this lover, or maybe helps you be owned by your dog. And that's the way I think of it, because I have 2 pets here who clearly own me and my wife. And then you said something which is beautiful and off color, of course, that we're going to pay attention to. And that's the sad clown, the tears of a clown. Is that what you said? It was. I hope
I did say sad clown. Yeah, it was one of the personas that we learned about in our chaplaincy training. We can circle back to that later if you want. I know you pay a lot of attention to the clinical process. And,
so the sad clown, the tears of a clown, if you will,
Fabulous song. I love it.
Amazing song, of course. And I'm a Detroiter, so I know a little bit about that kind of music. And indeed, it sounds like you do too. And the tears of a clown when there's no one around. And we're start really looking at what is a sad clown in the face of somebody who has it. You appear to have so much on the ball. You are gifted with so many beautiful things, because you also are a chaplain. You also are a cantor, and you didn't even list either of those here. So we have.
That's true.
So we have all these things, and you have written songs, and you even wrote some plays, as far as I know.
It's one musical with a few others in the works, but
right. So. We start looking at all of these creative outlets and this amazing life you have as a musician, as a creator, as a father, a husband, a dog owner, a lover. And then you get, yes, you're a work in progress like we all are, and you're always learning, so humbly willing to take on that life keeps serving you up and you keep learning more about who you really are. With all of that said, what is the sadness of the clown? How does that work? Where is the mercy, or where is the pain or the sadness emanating from? I think I have an idea, but I'd love for you to attempt to express it at this time.
Are we talking clowns in general or the one who's on your show tonight?
The one who's on my show, Ben.
You got it.
Yeah.
So look, I think like many entertainers, I want to be loved and enjoyed and adulated, at least occasionally.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think that pursuit can be a hell of an emotional roller coaster. That's thing one. Thing two, without disclosing too much gnarly details, I'll say that I carry some pain from growing up. I had a pretty challenging relationship with my father. He's still living, as is my mom. And through years and years of therapy, I'm at a place of healthy acceptance, but the relationship is still often painful. And it only continues because of my daughter, to be honest. And maybe because of the love of my mother, with whom I have a better relationship. But it's taken a lot of work to maintain that relationship into adulthood because of the level of, choosing my words carefully, say a lot of challenging pain and hurt received from a really difficult father figure. And I think that, as far as I understand it psychologically, has carried forward as a sort of disembodied voice of intense critique. One apocryphal story of my growing up, I was a bright and high achieving little kid through school, coming on up through my middle and late adolescence. And I'd get a report card, high honor roll, all high 90s and so forth. And then there'd be a 93. And my father would say, so what's going on with that science grade?
Right. Yeah.
And I did just fine, for the record, in high school, went on to some rather fancy colleges. And despite having a grand old time, I still managed to graduate with good grades. But I'll tell you that frightening, angry voice of critique has morphed into a voice that is a particularly vicious inner critic, which can be painful to live with. And then a different source of sadness when I was growing up, like a lot of funky creative people, I was just a little bit of a social outcast as a child. I always liked adults better than my peers. I think they appreciated me more. I was talkative and kooky, and adults find that charming and peers find that weird. So I have memories at different points in my youth coming up of feeling rather lonely and feeling rather left out. So I know a lot of listeners who love musical theater are going to be excited about what I'm talking about. So I'll just keep referencing musicals to just throw them a bone. Dear Evan Hansen is a recent wonderful musical about teenage loneliness and alienation. I saw that on Broadway early in its run with Ben Platt, and it was just spectacular and heartbreaking. And I wept several times during the show, and I've loved it for many years since. Plenty of other angsty musicals as well, but that one kind of stands out because that lonely feeling of on the outside always looking in, that little beautiful lyric speaks to my youthful experience. I was a rather late bloomer in every sense of the word, physically maturing, romantically, sexually. Even as a vocalist, I was very good in high school, made it to a fancy conservatory, but it wasn't until my mid-20s I discovered I was a tenor, and now I'm a singing way up high tenor. It happens once in a while. But the sadness about feeling left out and feeling socially awkward, maybe feeling romantically undesirable for a long time until I found, hey, some people like me as I was, that old pain, I think, is also carried forward. So those are just some of the highlights. And I guess the last one I ought to mention, because you have a doctor in front of your name, I present as a youngish guy. I'm 43, but I carry some rather gnarly chronic pain issues related to an injury I suffered when I was in college. You're going to see me fidgeting a little bit more than your regular guest, and that's because of some challenges I have with my back. So sometimes I'm presenting as an affable, friendly, happy person, and I try my best to be that. But I might be sitting with some pretty intense pain shooting up my sides or my hips or my lower back.
Understood, appreciated, received. I got that. So
cool.
You're anything but a regular guest, by the way, and I totally get that as well. And one of the things I'm noticing as you speak, when answering or responding to the question about sad clown, is that I wonder if this sad clown that came from the upbringing, that came from the outside looking in, that came from adults and not peers, that came from the being ostracized either by your own inner critic or by the critic of your dad, or many of the other ways that you found yourself wanting and needing some form of adulation, is how you spoke with it today. There's a wonder, there's a curiosity about the source of your creativity being driven, that this is some ways the source or the fuel that then creates the outlets that show up in music, or that show up in writing, or that show up in storytelling. That the pain itself being under self-expressed or being sub-adequately expressed during your youth and your upbringing found its way to be expressed. And it even can be expressed through joy, of course. But it's a pulsating pain, I wonder, that then gets its outlet through the visual and performing arts. Is there any truth to this hypothesis that you can wrap yourself around?
Some real interesting stuff there, Doctor. I'll say this. I know that I'm a deeply feeling person.
Right.
And earlier tonight, I was riding the emotional roller coaster with my 12-and-a-half-year-old daughter. She is, like her daddy, high achieving. And like her daddy, she's in middle school before her. She's now hitting the wall in terms of being clever isn't enough. Now you got to roll up your sleeves and put in the time. Algebra, among others.
Yeah.
And
cleverness is not going to solve the quadratic equation, is it?
No, you got to work your tail off to learn that stuff.
Yeah.
I made it all the way to calculus. I chose not to do the exam, but I was also staying after school literally multiple days a week, junior and senior year, to keep my head above water.
Yeah.
So I can relate to the challenge, but I'm also like, okay, let's get through this. Now, what brought that up? I'm trying to think.
Oh, this idea of what is the fuel or the source of your activity. Yeah.
There's this emotional roller coaster that I think a lot of creative people, especially the drama people, the singer people, the songwriter people, we feel the feels extra.
Yeah.
And in a sense, it's our superpower.
Exactly.
I've done a lot of work writing songs, and I've gone to songwriting workshops for 5 years running now with a wonderful songwriter named Sue Horowitz. And she talks about this a little bit, that a good songwriter pays close attention to a couple of things at once. Words and phrases that make you go, or any kind of funny, nondescript sound of thought or noticing. And even more importantly than the phrase, the feeling that goes with it.
Yeah.
I think part of what's been powerful for me emotionally on this epic 10-year journey of creating Life Review is being able to pour some of the feelings that you experience bedside as a clinician, as a chaplain. Not all of them, but I've written a lot of stuff, some of which made it into the musical. There's a lot of orphan songs in notebooks, a lot of scribblings of stories and memories, much of which became source material for the fictionalized characters based on real people. But I can tell you, for me as a very emotional person, singing helps it come out in a healthy way. Dance once in a while. I've gotten into piano, guitar, ukulele in my 30s and 40s now. Ukulele, the most recent thing. And ukulele is not like deeply emotional the way I can sing and pour out like that. But there's something about stepping out of your emotions when they're really intense and putting them into craft or putting them into the work towards being able to be artistic with the instrument. And I'm starting to get little glimpses of being able to play in a beautiful, not hokey way on the ukulele, which is like a big step. But I mentioned like the doing the art as a thing because whether it's a productive project like creating a musical over all this time or playing in visual arts, as you mentioned, like one of the joys of having a daughter, Dr. Fred, is that in her school age years in particular, she was super into visual arts and always wanted me to, or often wanted me to join in. Sitting down and playing in art all over again has been such a joy for me. And now, alongside some of her art materials, I have one of those professional grade sketchbooks. It's $30 or $40, a spectacularly expensive notebook, but worth it if you love to draw and paint. And in my recent years, I've discovered that there's a great joy. Like sometimes I'll do a little watercolor doodles. I'll do figures. Sometimes when we travel, we draw. So the emotions that I'm able to tap into for performance and songwriting are a superpower, but they're also, I keep going back to this metaphor of the roller coaster, but to use the comic book stuff, it can be a little bit of the Hulk if it's angry, or I don't know, Eeyore if we're Winnie the Pooh and it's our depressed friend. We were talking earlier about the sad clown. That archetype, the sad clown, plays with those dualities. I think because historically a lot of entertainers are deeply troubled people. My wife happens to be a psychology major as an undergrad a few years ago now, right? But she always tells that it's funny that she married a guy like me with all of my psychological baggage and all of my creative expression, because her favorite college class as a psych major was it's like the psychology of creativity, but it probably had a more provocative title because it was really focused on the mental illness of creative people.
I see,
So I'm sure it had a great title in the catalog. Forgive me for not remembering. But you get the idea. It's like, why do all these rockers drink and drug themselves to death at 27?
Right.
Why did Van Gogh cut his ear off, allegedly, or something? Right. Yeah. But there's this, it's not a neat correlation, but there's a nice little scatter plot of creative people with a lot of stuff going on.
For sure. And I don't see that as being even a bit surprising. The books that I've written have addressed exactly this. The one book I wrote was called The Creative Eight, Healing Through Creativity and Self-Expression, and actually picks the 8.
I want to get that book and read it.
Absolutely. Feel free to get it. It's on Amazon, and I can get you a free copy. You can actually download it.
You know a guy, don't you, Dr. Fred?
So the Creative Eight looks at art, music, dancing, singing, drama, cooking, writing, and gardening as the top 8 creative actions that actually alleviate or are utilized frequently to express that pain or that discomfort that actually represents all of humanity, the whole smorgasbord of humanity, including the misery, including the pain, including the unspeakable, as well as the ecstatic and the beautiful and the wonderful. And all of that comes out inside of the self-expression that art in its visual and performing components can offer, over and above the words that we're choosing to exchange with each other in this particular conventional conversation. Creative Eight really takes a nice peek at that, and thanks for letting me plug it. But really the point here now is to look a little bit at what you have already called Life Review. Tell us a little bit about the genesis of Life Review and maybe what led up to it, what it then has become, or what it then became, and now what it has become over the years.
Thanks for that. So Life Review, the Hospice musical, is a new musical comedy that I created along with several composer friends. Its genesis began just over 10 years ago when I was a beginner chaplain working in central New Jersey. Shout out to Center for Hope and Scotch Plains in Elizabeth, where I was a beginner chaplain intern studying to minister to patients dealing with end-of-life care and their loved ones, because it's always the patients and the loved ones. So one of the important techniques you learn, Dr. Fred, is this technique called Life Review. So I didn't invent that phrase, but I chose to borrow it for the name of my musical. And what it is you go and it's a structured interview. It's considered a clinical technique, and it's meant to draw up like I call it a highlight reel of a person's life. So I ended up writing a song that's the title track, so to speak, for the show that is built in this question format. And what's cool about it is I sing it looking at the audience, breaking that fourth wall. And I invite anyone who's listening to me sing or watching me and listening to reflect on their own life. Just to quote the first 4 lines, who are you? What did you do? Where did you go? Who did you know?
Yeah.
Now, just right there, if you stop, that could send you off to the races. Yeah. Who are you? I think you said, who are you, as your opener with me. And it's a good one. But where did you go? That could be a person's whole journeys and so forth, right? So you get how it works. It's a beautiful song that I'm really proud of. But before that had become a song, it was a clinical practice. And what I was hearing were these amazing stories from people bedside. If the people in hospice care were lively and conversant, communicative enough to tell the stories, then we could have these interviews. But in some cases, Doc, you could have these conversations with the loved ones. You can do a life review on behalf of the person who's no longer speaking. Tell me about where he lived. Tell me about his jobs and so forth. So I had these amazing conversations, and I got these stories from people ranging from like flashy, exciting lives. I met a guy who claimed to be CIA. I met another man he's no longer alive, but was super famous in the labor movement, but I can't tell you who he was, HIPAA. And then I met people who were like homeowners and proud of paying their mortgage and sending their kid to community college, work in a blue collar job, and everything in between. Yeah. Not like that's a judgy scale, but it's the point being that like famous people and workaday people and everyone in between, even indigent people, because we had a charity care service as well. They all needed quality end of life care, and they all had stories to tell. And one night I was driving home, called my wife on the cell phone, and I said, honey, I think these stories want to be songs. And she said, get writing. That night, I picked up one of these journal books, the black and white kind you have in school, and I started scribbling notes for what would become a ballad that has made it all the way to this day, 10 years later. It's called Will It Still Snow? And it's a song, a woman imagining, will winter come back after she dies? She loves winter. She used to be from New England, skied with her kids. And she's wondering, will life go on without her? Which I think is one of those big questions people think about on their deathbed, along with a lot of other big questions. So that was the first song I wrote. I shared it at a little song swap at a Jewish education conference. It wasn't even a music thing, but that was a music session. And the room was full of tears. The leader came to me and said, Ben, I think you've created something of great power. Is there more? I said, yes, there is. And she encouraged me to keep going. Another year later, I shared 2 songs or 3 songs at a late night. And then she said, next year you get a stage. So it was that year where I really hit the ground running. I got a collaborator. I wrote a bunch of songs. Several professional singers from the Jewish community presented solos in like a concert setting. So that was in beautiful Reed College in Portland, Oregon. 6 months later, I did the workshop thing again, but with an even bigger work. Now 16 songs, a full dialogue. That is the full show as it is now. That was presented with local community theater talent. And we put on a one-night-only performance here in Columbia, Maryland. That, I'm excited to say, was standing room only. People laughed, they cried. It was fantastic. In fact, if you guys log on to the website later, lifereviewmusical.com, there's a trailer with some beautifully shot footage from that live event. So you can see what it was all about. Wow. It was standing room only. It was exciting. It was a month and a half before COVID hit and shut down live theater. So then I was stuck at home like all of us. And all of us live performers, I was rather depressed. There was no clowning. I was just sad at that point. And talking with a coach, shout out to wonderful Alexandra Palting of the Hustling Creative. She said, Ben, either you're going to take that beautiful piece of art and put it in a drawer and wait till COVID ends, if it ever does, or you're going to pivot so you can perform. And she introduced me to the idea of a virtual streaming show. I resisted it mightily. It took 3 expensive coaching sessions to get over that resistance. I don't know about you, Dr. Fred, but I certainly prefer being with people live in person.
Oh, yeah.
But on the other hand, I couldn't be having this lovely conversation with you but for the power of the internet.
True.
And so what I discovered during this time when I was rather sad that I couldn't be performing this show that felt like it was on its way up and up, we were all stuck inside. So what could I do? I could perform. And in this humble little beautiful basement studio, I have hooks on the top of the wall. You see those tiny things? So I have a rod with a black curtain, and then I stand up, adjust my lamps, and it looks bright. And I do the one-man show right here from the basement, and I can stream it anywhere in the world.
Fantastic.
So I performed that 10 times over the course of the pandemic, and I'm now doing engagements live in person, the one-man show, and talking about future partnerships to do the full show, hopefully in the future. So a lot of exciting possibilities. And I'll tell you, like, the last thing about the crazy end of the journey with the COVID pivot and whatnot, I was just talking about this with a new podcast friend. You know how we podcast people become friends through our nice interviews. New podcast friend. And he was saying, yeah, man, you can do your show anytime you want. And I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, have you heard of Facebook Live? You could just try it. Just see. Now, I don't know if I'm going to do it or not, but it's one of 20 different ways you can put your content up on the internet now. That's super exciting. In fact, November 11th, I'm doing a live house concert here nearby in Silver Spring, Maryland. Maximum, call the fire department capacity, 40 people. And that's going to be tight. I expect to sell out. But we're also doing streaming. And I'm going to advertise it through my various channels, and we'll see who tunes in. But it's exciting because in absent this tech, Doc, I turn you away if you're number 41, right?
Yeah.
This is one of the few happy things about the COVID experience for us creatives, that so many of us in the live performance business had to pivot to doing the thing online, and now it's an option to expand our audience. So that's cool.
That's very cool. And so thank you so much for the storyline that lets us see what you had created and how you got there, and the whole process of growing through the first song, or even before the first song, into the first song, and then the discussion with your wife that launches this, as well as what starts to be a compilation over time, and year after year you get to grow and grow until there's 16, until there's an actual item, until there's an actual event. And
until there's jazz hands.
You know, there you are. And there you are. There it is. And there we are, actually being privileged to be on the receiving end of such an what I'm sure is a really wonderful production, which I don't want to miss, by the way. And so we start looking at who you become and how you got there. And one of the real questions is, you've tossed this word healer around, and I'd love to hear, where are you the healer? And what are you presenting that you notice is healing people? Because you don't have to try to heal. You just end up being a healer in most cases. So what is it that you do that heals? And if it is to play music, I'd love to have you pick up one of your favorite instruments back there and maybe bring it to the front of the camera now.
Sure. So I'll mention that my current main job is music teacher.
Which you didn't mention at all yet.
Which I didn't mention, and I think it might be on the bio, maybe not. If it was omitted, I apologize.
No, I think it's on the first line, actually. I think it's
no worries. It feels semi-tangential to the Cantor and Chaplain piece, so I understand the omission. I mention it because it's what I do 40-something hours a week. And as an elementary school music teacher, I have to be empathetic. I have to be loving, but also firm to keep things safe and orderly. And there are often moments when children are in distress. So 2 or 3 times a week, I work a shift on the blacktop or the playground. So when a kid falls, If they're 5 or 6, they come to you in hysterics in some cases. So having the sort of calm to be able to say, oh, looks like you fell down.
Yeah.
Ouch.
Yeah.
It looks like you're upset right now. Does that hurt?
Yeah.
I bet you it hurts. Come with me. And if they're little, I'll hold them by the hand. If they're big, I'll guide them by the shoulder blade, and walk them to the door. And I'll say, I'll let you in. Or maybe if I see a friend looking concerned,
Sure.
I say, will you come walk your friend into the nurse? Thank you. You're a good friend. Knowing that the child will comfort the other, and I need to keep supervising the other 80 kids, right? So those kinds of moments of distress, I feel like I bring my healer self, what I learned as a chaplain and a cantor,
Beautiful.
to the children of my school. And I have 130 students, K to 4, who I teach music to. So there's a lot of opportunities to heal when kids are around.
That's
In my chaplaincy role, Dr. Fred, for which I trained 4 years as a clinical pastoral education CPE student, like 1,000 hours over those 4 years of clinical work, supervised work. The healing was bedside visits. That's the main thing that a chaplain does. For those of you listening, if you're not familiar with the term, it's a person of faith, usually a clergy professional, who visits in a helping manner to people in distress. Now, we call it spiritual distress because clergy and chaplains think of problems in terms of the spirit, even if we're not talking religion. And I'm using air quotes because people make big distinctions about those. Certainly in hospice, I was mentioning the other day in a conversation, fun fact about hospice, it's like one of the biggest rule breakers of church versus state, and it's totally sanctioned by everyone. And the reason is, when government was funding an expansion of hospice services, it was seen that the chaplain was an integral part of the care team, because research showed that nearly everyone in hospice expressed spiritual distress, not just like general anxiety, but, oh my God, I'm dying, etc. And if you think about any of your personal listener, if you think about your own brushes with mortality, I'm guessing it may have shooken you up a little bit in terms of your theology and your belief. Or if you have watched a loved one get sick and die, or get sick and recover, it may have affected your personal relationship with God or spirituality, right? So there's something about the life and death that really jolts people's sense of spiritual need and spiritual exploration. So the chaplains are a super important part of the care team in that way.
Yeah.
Enough of that. So when I was there, some of the caring was sitting and talking, the life review that I described earlier. Some of it was music. I brought that beautiful guitar over my left shoulder that I'll play maybe later on a bit.
Yeah, I'd love to have you close us out with a guitar piece.
Perfect. That'll be good. And I've got a nice soothing one. Yeah, so sometimes it was up-tempo, sing-along style, and I've got those chops like a campfire guy. I remember a guy named Sidney who just loved patriotic songs. Of course, he was World War II vet, or Korea, one of them. And he knew every verse to This Land Is Your Land, like all 8 of them. And he knew all 5 verses of God Bless America. And just loved that. That was healing for him, to be joyful, to remember his youthful, vigorous self through songs that he sang as a kid, and he would tell me that. For others, the music had a different kind of healing aspect, a sense of soothing. I mentioned in passing that some of the conversations are two-way, if the person is still able to speak, even in their dying days. Yeah. A lot of people with cancer are lucid even as their body's shutting down. Conversely, people with Parkinson's or ALS or late-stage Alzheimer's, not typically any conversation. Right. So in those cases, it might be a one-way kind of thing, like me literally playing guitar quietly. I play recorder really beautiful, that small woodwind instrument, and I would just sit there for 30 minutes and play ballads from his favorite Israeli folk singers.
Outstanding. Outstanding. That's outstanding. Yeah.
Thanks. And it was on a very selfish level. If I had a rough shift, sometimes 30 minutes of playing music quietly by myself would feel as helpful for me as I imagined it might be for the patient in the bed. Also have a sweet, brief little story. Once I was doing this for an older African-American woman who was non-communicative, and I was playing some of my favorite old African-American spirituals. And unbeknownst to me, her adult daughter was outside of the door, entered the room towards the end of the visit in tears, and said, this was amazing because my mom used to sing those songs and she sang them to me. And so I could have never, this is like a Hollywood type script, I couldn't have written that. But it just happened because music is so powerful and a little bit of serendipity.
Yeah.
So sometimes, unbeknownst to us, our kind gestures of healing towards one person can have a ripple effect.
Yeah, absolutely. That's right. Exactly. So, Ben, we are reaching the end of this conversation, and you've been amazing. I'm wondering if you can sign us off with a piece of probably your guitar. Is that what you're going to go get for this?
Yeah, I think so. I'll introduce the song. The main character is a Rabbi Chaplain, plays a little guitar as he visits some of his patients.
Yeah.
And late in the play, a patient who he's particularly fond of calls him in, and he says, just sit with me for a little bit.
Sure.
I'm having a trouble falling asleep.
All right.
He offers the following song.
Beautiful. Let's hear it.
Let's see. Still on camera. It's pretty good.
Yeah, you got it.
All right. Lay on back, rest your head, lay thee down safe in bed. Close your eyes, darling dear, you drift away, I'll stay right here. Time to sing a lullaby, sing a soft, sincere goodbye. Tuck you in for a dream so sweet, heaven awaits, your life's complete. Hold your hand, wipe your tears, kiss your face, soothe your fear. You are holy, your life's been blessed. Now my love, it's time to rest. Time to sing a lullaby, sing a soft, sincere goodbye. Tuck you in for a dream so sweet, heaven awaits, your life's complete. So rest in peace. Rest in peace. Rest in peace. Rest in peace.
Yay. Fantastic. Really beautiful, Ben. Thank you so much for sharing with us. Truly terrific. That's Ben Kintisch, y'all. Ben is a music teacher. He is a husband. He is a father. He is a dog owner. He's a singer, a musical writer, and a work in progress, always learning. And don't forget that Ben is a sad clown underneath all this. And really a sad clown who has taken this energy and become a creative who is, without question, an obvious healer in everyone and anyone that he comes in contact with. Ben, it's been a super pleasure being with you on the Healthy Healer. Thanks for joining us. Anything you want to say to our audience before we sign off, man?
My brief soapbox pitch before the get in touch pitch. The soapbox is, if there's a message from my show, visiting the people you care about makes a difference for both of you. Whether it's a loved one who's older or younger, if they're sick, injured, dying, or just struggling, take the time to visit. And if you can't visit, call, FaceTime, text. I've never met someone in a funeral who was proud that they'd fallen out of touch. There's so much regret when people forget to stay connected. So I encourage you to stay connected. And if you're out of touch with someone, especially who's dealing with serious medical stuff, get in touch. You'll never regret it. So that's my message I like to share. I have a website, lifereviewmusical.com, where you can see a great trailer and hear some of the music. There's also a forum to get in touch. I am making engagements for the one-man show, streaming and live in person, as well as looking for theatrical partners to talk about presenting the full-length show. So if you're involved with the theater and you're interested, please do get in touch. I'm also active on Instagram at Life Review Musical. And I think those are the main two things. Yes. So thanks so much for listening, everybody. And it's really been a joy, Dr. Fred. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. It really has been a joy. Thanks for the partnership and thanks for the great conversation. And listeners, if you are turned on as much as I was by this conversation, it'd be great if you could share it with your friends or at least comment and maybe subscribe. This is how we get our audience to grow. And this is how we get really important messages such as today's out to the people who need to hear it. So thank you so much, Ben. Thank you so much, listeners. I love you all. Thank you for being here, and we will catch you on the flip side. Bye for now.